Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank and Chase Commercial Term Lending, the Witkoff Group, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman and Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley and Lardner, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investment Developers, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knakal Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, N.A., Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, MHP Real Estate Services, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Continuum Company, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
The West Side. All of a sudden, there's so much development taking place in the West Side. Buildings, office buildings, retail, hotels. It could have been a Coliseum. It could have been a stadium, but there's so much happening in the West Side. So today I've assembled this distinguished group. I'm not sure how distinguished, with the exception of one person. This distinguished group of individuals to discuss what's happening on the West Side. We have the chairman of Global Brokerage. We have no idea what Global Brokerage is, but my good friend Bruce Mosler from Cushman and Wakefield. We have Governor Eliot Spitzer, who is the principal at Spitzer Enterprises. Arthur Mirante, who is the president for the tri-state region and a principal at Avison Young. And last but not least, the statistician, president or chairman?
Chairman.
Chairman of investment sales for Cushman and Wakefield, Bob Knakal. So, Eliot, I don't know why I put you in this group.
Yeah, there's all these brokers. I'm not going to buy anything today. I'm done.
Now, wait a second. Isn't it true that you bought one of your sites from this guy?
I've done a slew of deals with Mr. Knakal and have enjoyed every one of them. He is, you called him the statistician. He knows everything, knows everybody, and is just a pleasure to deal with.
So,
thank you.
Okay, so let's get to this point. What are you doing on the West Side?
I got lost. Now, let me tell you something. This goes back a little bit farther for me when I was in government, and there was a proposal to put a stadium on the rail yards, which I thought was just a poor use of, from an urban planning perspective. You could build tens of millions of feet of commercial, retail, residential, hotels. You had the High Line, you had the 7 Line that was added on later, the Javits Center, now the Boulevard Park. This is a metropolis being built in a compressed time frame, so it's hard to move around that neighborhood right now. But in aggregate, when you're done, an entire new epicenter of culture, transportation, conventions, hotels, residences. It's great for the city because the city to grow needs that dynamism of new organic growth in new areas.
And, something that Arthur was joking before the show that I've always been a pessimist. I'm partially a pessimist. But, you have the venues. As you said, the subway's over there, the number 7's over there. You have the Port Authority, a couple of blocks away. You have Penn Station. More transportation than anything over there. You have the venue, the opportunities of coming over from the Lincoln Tunnel tunnel. So there's so many great situations. So as I was asking you, what are you planning to build on your site?
Well, look, we're not certain yet. And as I've said, we have the capacity right now to build a bit over 800,000 square feet. The zoning permits 25% of it to be, when you accumulate the air rights, which obviously we are doing and will finish up, 25% residential, which I think most people would agree makes sense with virtually any of the towers there, although some of the people who are doing pure commercial might disagree. And then the retail at the bottom. How you fill out the rest of it could be hotels, could be commercial, but I'm not sure that you necessarily want to compete with the Brookfield, a Tishman Speyer, and are related in terms of getting your commercial tenants. And so you want to be, I'm not anywhere close to their size. I think interstitially
So here's the question for the three others. How much square footage eventually, and I'm not talking about Eliot's property, I'm talking in general going from 30th Street to, let's say, 38th Street or 39th?
40, even higher, 43rd.
Okay, to that, how many square feet of office do you contemplate being new space coming out there? Arthur, Bruce?
Go ahead.
I think it could get to 20 million square feet of office space.
Well, and they contemplated 28.6.
Right.
Which, again, perspective-wise, would be larger than Dallas, which is the fifth largest market in the country. So when you talked about this now epicenter of Manhattan having shifted west, it really has. We're talking about a city within a city. And the vision to do this, by the way, was really quite on in terms of the need. Most of our product is over 75 years old. We've had very little new construction over the last 30 years. We're only going to add, best case, 20 million feet over the next 5 years. We need new product, and people want to be on the west side. They want to be in exciting new product. They want to be in efficient space. Businesses need to be in efficient space, so the timing on this couldn't be more perfect.
Now,
No, I would just add on that vision, because, this community was planned. It was planned well.
Yes.
It was planned as a diverse project. And we've already got the residential in place, and the commercial is following, and then the retail is going to follow.
Which is what I was saying before prior to the show. A number of those TF Cornerstone buildings and some of the other buildings which were built on 37th, 38th, and 39th, they stuck out like nothing was there. And, there was vision to make this a true community as opposed to just building one type of thing. Would you say that without the Hudson Yards air rights, and I would like you to explain that, some of this wouldn't have really happened to this level?
Well, Michael, I think when policy is set, elected officials can create motivation for the private sector
President
to do
company
something.
included.
No, absolutely. I think when policymakers come up with zoning proposals, they're trying to create incentives for the private sector to act in a certain way. When you have land values increase, that creates an incentive for property owners to sell their properties. When you get properties being sold, that creates new development. And using the district improvement bonus rights and the Eastern Rail Yards rights, which are the two FAR bonuses that are generally available in the area, that allows a buyer to pay more for the existing as of right FAR.
So you can
because
make
they can
more
average
money?
down. That's exactly why they did it, Michael. No, but what that has done is that has created tremendous increase in value.
So
which
for
has
my
created
viewers,
activity.
let's understand the situation. I'm not saying what Eliot did or someone. If somebody bought a piece of property basically for $400 a foot from an owner, what is the price today for one of the Hudson Yards, the two different air rights?
Well, the district improvement rights are now about $127 a foot. That's
They were
indexed every
108
year. They
originally?
started at 100, and they've been indexed every year. And the Eastern Rail Yards rights are a formula that is supposed to be 65% of the value of the air as if it was land. But not less than what the DIB price is.
So can I just add one thing? You need to understand, this is for, it's not to get too technical, 0 to 10, at least on our block, 0 to 10 is the FAR that goes with the raw land. 10 to 18 is the first layer, which is the 127, give or take a few pennies per buildable square foot. The 18 to 24 FAR is what you then pay for the top layer, the 65%.
And what is that ranging to the
Well, generally, and this is something that's very interesting. I've actually testified in court about the value of
We don't want
things.
any courts over
We're not going to court, but because it's very
We all give you the
difficult to
truth, though, you know.
understand. What matters is what the blended price is. It doesn't really matter what you pay for either component part. And I use as an example, there's a restaurant on 50th Street, Maloney and Porcelli, where they sell a plate of French fries for $50. It comes with a side of filet mignon. So you don't really care what you're paying for the fries or what you're paying.
That's why he's a broker. That's such a good metaphor. I've never heard that before.
Okay, so the blended. Okay, so
on a blended basis, the values today are ranging anywhere from the high 3s to the mid 4s. But it's important to look at every block within the Hudson Yards. There are different zonings, literally block to block.
Let's forget the rights and let's talk about who's coming there. Your firm recently you put in a very prominent firm to the related property.
The law firm of Boies Schiller, primarily a litigation firm. We looked all over the city, and it's interesting because the lease expiration doesn't occur until July 2019. Mm-hmm. So first we considered the renewal, and then we said, what if? What if we could avoid you paying double rent by making a lease all the way forward, the rent payment of which might not start until 2020. And we didn't know whether any of the new developers, the Hudson Yard developers, would actually reach for a tenant on that basis. And after all, we were only an 83,000 square foot tenant. It's not like we were a Skadden Arps of 500,000 square feet. And with a lot of hard work over an 18-month period, we kind of got lucky. Because
the timing worked from the development perspective, right? For occupancy.
You're absolutely right, Bruce. We had an owner that had just sold half of its equity to Mitsui, an institutional investor. Therefore, this owner, related, was willing to essentially commit to building their 1.2 million square foot building on spec for an 83,000 square foot tenant, acting as an anchor.
Can I add one thing, though? Given the way Boies Schiller has been growing, by the time they move in, they'll be 500,000 square feet.
Yeah. Not even
You
close,
know David,
right.
and he's suing me. I love David, but he'll be 500,000 square feet.
They are going to be expanding, Governor, but they won't be expanding anywhere near that rate.
So who else is moving in, Bruce?
Look, in the neighborhood, so to speak, at the other development in Hudson Yards, you have Coach, SAP, L'Oreal.
As you see, we do not have anyone from the related companies.
Well, you should. They're an outstanding organization.
They're a wonderful organization, but they prefer to be alone on a show.
But to say, just to answer your question, if I may, you have some of the most significant tenants in Manhattan that have committed now between Time, L'Oreal, SAP, Coach, Skadden Arps for Brookfield, Manhattan West, which is a 7.1 million square foot community, as we want to call it, because there will be residential,
but
there will be retail, there will be office.
Rink on top of that. I mean,
well, I'm sorry about that, but let's talk about formerly 450 West 33rd, now 5 Manhattan West. This is a building that has been released at extraordinary rents, I might add, to JP Morgan Digital, to Market, to RGA, a division of Interpublic, some of the most extraordinary tenants in Manhattan, whom have committed to be in the West Side. So to the point made earlier by the governor, the epicenter and the gravity of center have shifted to the West. It's where people want to be for the reasons that he touched upon, the desire to be in a live, work, play environment near the High Line, where you can be steps away from where you house yourself. The urbanization of the city has been extraordinary, and the ability to create a city within a city that's larger than Dallas says a lot about order of magnitude.
And let's go back a step
here.
Again, as the governor started this, $6 billion of public money investment. Yes. In addition to the creative zoning and the diversity, $6 billion in the High Line, but the train,
I think
Hudson Boulevard Park.
This was a truly well-planned development.
Yes.
Okay, and as Eliot said before, it was a much better idea than putting a stadium over here. We needed space. They're not building more land. Okay, there's a certain number of landfills. Now, here's my question. Arthur was saying the law firm decided on of the Hudson Yards, many firms are. When a tenant comes to the two of you or to your firms today, are they looking at all of the opportunities? Are they going to Lower Manhattan to the Trade Center? Where are they going? Because everybody talks about Tammy, everybody talks about the young millennium people over there.
Well, I don't want to go into statistics too far,
Forget
Mr. Stoller, but just.
But he's ready.
He's taking over for Knakal.
One minor point, just one minor point. But millennials now are the largest part of our workforce. There's 90 million millennials that are sort of in the prime of their business careers. These young people dictate what corporates want. They are part of this new, I think, energized group of folks that want to be in an urban environment, number one. Number two, they love the West Side because it gives them access to almost anything. And tenants today, companies today, their CEOs don't live where or close to where they live. They live where their workforce want to be. So they are looking
I'm going to have an access question on both of you.
Okay, but I just want to answer your question. They are looking at Midtown West. They are looking at downtown. They're doing the comparables on the two and making their choices based on the product, based on pricing, based on some other things that I think are the matrix.
The forgotten East Side. It's hot. From a tenant demand perspective, it's become the economic alternative. Absolutely.
It is the economic alternative. Ironically, it's the economic alternative.
The wheel turns. Every neighborhood that was cold at one point becomes hot. But I want to come back to the tenancy in the Hudson Yards. The beauty of it is that it is a cross-section of all the major industries in the city.
No question.
From media, law firms, finance, culture, retail,
right.
And I think that's what will make it a community. Because the one thing you worry about, as well planned as it was and is, you don't want it to be antiseptic. You don't want it to be just a series of tall office towers without the sort of street life that is Soho, Tribeca, Williamsburg, East Village. So you need somehow that dynamism, and that's what gives it.
Part of it, right. And the retail's going to be one of the more exciting parts.
The devil's advocate.
Okay, good. I'm happy.
Oh, boy, here we go.
Because
my own partner.
We're talking about how well planned it was. And yes, there are tremendous benefits to the planning that went on because you do have a mix of different types of uses. But overwhelmingly, the zoning in the yards requires mostly commercial space. And in the residential component of a lot of these mixed-use buildings is 20% resi, 24%, maybe 30% in some cases. What happens to that commercial component? And you can't build a resi until you built the commercial. And as Eliot said, you're not going to have a small owner with a 5,000 or 7,000 foot plot building office floors.
Right.
When they have to
have major people.
That's right.
The big boys. So how many small hotels can this area absorb? That's something where I think maybe having flexibility to convert some of that commercial space to residential would be beneficial because there's going to be one or two very big hotels.
Okay, we're going to get to the hotels in a section. Here's something. Williamsburg is very hip, and the L train is wonderful, but you can't get on the L train. Now we talk about the number 7 train. It's one train. Let's remember, one train, the number of people coming to the neighborhood. Will the number 7 train have a similar problem? Okay, I've heard the related story that they can go further, they can keep the trains back and forth, there's no question. But the L train has a small distance to travel, and you can't get on that train.
This is going to be... go ahead.
I was just saying, you're probably right. And it is, having said that, it's a better problem to have than not having it there at all or not having anybody on it in the first place. So, 100%. Yes, having overcapacity, overdemand for the subway. I'm a believer, since I was in college and bizarrely studied this thing, subways define urban growth. Transportation is the key. And I'm stating a platitude, but it's something that most people don't think about. We need more of it,
okay,
but at least we
Bob brings up an interesting point, with regard to hotels. There was a survey recently prepared by Bloomberg with regard to the price of hotels. San Francisco, the price of hotels this year went up, the room rent went up 82%. The rate in New York City went down by 5%. Mm-hmm. What's happening in New York, we're building too many hotels. We're building, coupled with the other combinations, the Airbnb. So if you take the hotels and the Airbnb, we're adding all of these rooms and all the situation. as we said earlier before the show, when we had the Javits Center, the hotels there were all second-rate hotels, 2-star, 3-star budget hotels. Now we have an area that we're going to be building hotels, and there's a question of what type of hotels, and there's a question of, if you're making...
And why is that taking place? Because tourism is at record levels.
56 million people, there's no question.
And why is that taking place? Because our government has provided us, at least for the last 10 plus years, with a safe city and a clean city. Relatively speaking.
Used to be safe.
It's still safe. No. It's still safe.
No political.
We're going to all get on that one.
It's city in a long time.
But Mike, you got 10 years before that 7 train is taxed from the west side.
You know what?
Maybe 20.
I think the topic on this 7 train is a 10-year, 15-year situation. I agree with you.
Right.
My question is with more of the hospitality, okay? That's one of my questions. The second question that I have, it's wonderful that Related is building this 1 million square feet of retail. And I think in order to make the entire community, we need other type of retail around the neighborhood. You can't live on Clyde's as the only restaurant that was...
There will be more. Let me come back to what you said about the hotel rates, though. And nothing in history moves in a straight line. Hotel rates in the city have been going like this since 2008. Inevitably, there's going to be a dip. The good news is the market works. When rates are going like this, people add capacity. You add a bit more than you should. Rates drop down a little bit. But with tourism continuing to grow, the city hopefully continuing to be safe, population growing, every other indicator going the right way, eventually it picks up and moves back the other way. The bumps and the drops are a necessary part of inducing people to do what they need to do in the marketplace.
Michael, don't forget, we lost about 15% of our hotel rooms, 05, 06, 07, when hotel rooms being converted to condos. But I think that one thing the city could potentially do to raise some revenue is to create a mechanism whereby owners could pay a fee or a bonus to the city to convert that mid-level commercial space to residential. Be great revenue for the city.
Idea.
Market forces would
work. So basically, you're in essence saying what happened Lower Manhattan in the 90s, the 421Gs.
Something similar.
Okay,
a way to
tax
create
abatement
revenue
or something.
to enhance amenities in the area and further, enhance transportation, what have you.
I think Bob is exactly right. Let me step back one little bit. If you had to say, is the city short relatively commercial or residential? I think we'd all say residential, right? We would want to create something of an inducement, the rigid sort of 25-75 split in the Hudson Yards, 25% residential. If you could move that up to maybe 35-40 as a way for the city to generate revenue, maybe get some inclusionary housing, smart idea, and hopefully somebody in City Hall will listen to Bob Knakal.
Residential rental in particular. And
yes, exactly.
Just to come up behind the question on sort of infrastructure, I think, Hudson Yards is pretty unique. When you look at being a block away from the most traveled hub in North America, Penn Station, you look at the 7 line being in advance of when I think the significant growth in population will occur.
The Port Authority.
The Port Authority going to continue to sort of expand the services. I think it's in relatively good shape. This is pretty unique for Manhattan. We're not chasing the tail of the dog.
And Bruce, the rental buildings that have come online have done extraordinarily
100%.
well. They've leased faster than anticipated, at higher rents than anticipated.
That's right.
Clearly, there's demand for people who want to live in that area.
And if you get right outside of Hudson Yards, a little bit north on 42nd Street,
no, that's spectacular.
Those buildings have been an unprecedented success.
But here's one of the unfortunate design errors that was made, not adding a 7-stop up there. Now, it would have added a significant number of riders, to your point. On the other hand, not having a 7-stop up there.
They dug the hole.
I hate to tell you,
that's right.
That's a pity because it's a travesty over there that there are so many people over there with the housing, with everything, with Joe's new building and everything else.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking about that, what's Joe planning to do on his site over there on Hudson Boulevard?
We should be announcing in the next couple of weeks that we're going to be going forward to complete our foundations. That's a big step for us.
And that he can build what over there, 1.8?
1.8 million square feet. If we build all office, we can build 1.9.
Bobby, who's buying today? I noticed recently that Kafu, the Chinese guys, have recently purchased. Kuafu purchased over there. Who else is buying in the of the usual players and the unusual players?
Michael, just about everybody, and the folks who,
including Spitzer Enterprise,
including the governor. The traditional New York developers have have exhibited almost an insatiable appetite for land over there. And interestingly, all of the new folks, as we've talked about on the show many times over the past couple of years, the influx of new first-time buyers from around the country and around the globe has been unprecedented. And those folks are looking at the Hudson Yards as something that will be the epicenter of the city someday.
Sovereign wealth there.
So
right.
we get more interest and more bids on sites that we have in the yards than almost any other place in the city, unless you're in an absolutely AAA prime location.
So when are we going to get, everybody looks at like 57th Street, which Eliot knows rather well, but they look at the 9 West 57th. They look at 40, Lefrak's building. When are we going to see those people who were at the GM building, 9 West, put their top floors of the building in the Hudson Yards?
I think they're contemplating it as we speak. Michael, I think there's not a tenant that's contemplating relocating. That doesn't.
Bill Ackman making the commitment to 57th Street.
That's prestige.
Okay.
Yeah,
tenants are going to.
That's never going to wane.
No, but he went to 11th
So you're talking about all the way west with
I'm
his
talking
offices,
all the way.
right? Not 157.
I'm not talking about 157.
Yeah.
I'm talking about. I think the statement comes when somebody who leaves 767, the GM building, or leaves something else, and there are rumors, that major.
Michael, I think in a way it's been made. When Skadden leaves the Condé Nast Tower, now granted Times Square may not be 57th Street, but when they leave the Condé Nast Tower to go to the Hudson Yards, I think that in Skadden, given its size, its preeminence, that is a boys' shower, not same scale, but same name reverence. I mean, I think these are very significant tenants.
You asked the question before.
The
culture of these firms is going to dictate ultimately what's important to them. Is it prestige? Is it efficiency? The efficiency offered by the new construction in the yards is dramatic. Mm-hmm. From 20% to 30%
That's right.
savings. You have ceilings that are 3 or 4 foot higher, floor-to-ceiling glass. You have a much friendlier, ecologically futuristic, sustainable office space to offer your people.
And
if you want prestige, you're going to stay
right, but
on 57th
as Bruce said, look, the millenniums want to be in a certain environment, there's a certain situation. One quick question. We are in the WeWork world. Everybody's talking each and every day about WeWorks. Do we see the office share of the WeWorks or we share in the co-work going to the Hudson Yards? I mean, have there been discussions?
I think the answer to that is that's the incubator for the Hudson Yards in the future.
They'll definitely be there, Michael. At the end of the day, this is one of the ways that large corporates look at temporary housing for their employees. At the end of the day, it's the WeWorks of the world have defined and distinguished themselves differently. They're going to be very successful. They're going to be in Hudson Yards, and so will the major banking institutions. But for time now, people want to be in this location because it is now the epicenter.
Last comment.
But it's not surprising that WeWorks is building its new building
in the Brooklyn.
Out in Brooklyn. I mean,
Exactly.
Emotionally,
they want to be everywhere.
That's right.
So
and based on their market cap, they're going to own us all pretty
in
soon.
summation, in our concluding shows of the 14th season, we'll come back in the 15th season when Eliot can announce what he's doing. Joe will announce what he's doing. We'll see who's renting space, what's happening over there.
Bruce will be fishing.
And Bruce will be fishing. Because, he's making so much money.
Bob Knakkal's ideas will be put into policy.
Right.
But I'd like to thank Bruce, Eliot, Arthur, and Bob, and I'll see you next week.